This is Through My Lens with Phylicias Short. She's the Assistant Athletic Director for Communications at Queen's University of Charlotte. She's also a great friend. She's also my former boss. I'm Phil Constantino, Director of Broadcasting at Gardner Webb, here to talk about Phylicia, my dear friend. How are you, Phy?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Let's talk about your journey to being in an administrative position in one of the most successful and prominent Division II athletic departments. You started as a student athlete at Queens.
Right.
What year?
My freshman year was 2003, 2004.
Basketball player.
Yes.
How many points? Over 1,000, correct?
Yes, over 1,000.
And you graduated, so then what, 07, 08?
07.
07. And after graduation, how did you become involved with the sports information department?
I actually got involved my senior year as an intern for our now director of athletics, Sherry Swartout. I interned in the sports information department my senior year. We're required to have internships at Queens. We were then. I think we still require that for graduation now. And something I didn't know I would be interested in, and kind of fell in love with it. And after I finished that internship my senior year, an assistant position opened up, part-time assistant, which would kind of be looked at as a GA position, if you look at it now. And I applied for it and ended up getting it, and started that summer, and I'm still here.
Never left.
Never left.
So what was it specifically that drew you to a career, maybe not just in sports information, but also in college athletics?
For me, just college athletics as a whole was something that I was passionate about. As a former student athlete, I didn't think about a career in it until I interned that year. Originally, I was planning on, I was a business admin major. I'd actually started off as an accounting major, and had just, in Charlotte with all the banks, I planned on going uptown to get a job at a bank and going on with my life. But that year when I interned and realized there was a whole nother career that I could be a part of, I kind of shifted and pivoted and changed my mind, and the assistant position opened up and I applied and got it. And that was the path I decided to take and stay on at that point.
Let's talk about dirty work, Phy. In Division II, obviously I've worked with you for 5 years. And even at a successful Division II like Queens that puts 14, 15 teams a year into the NCAAs and has national champions, conference champions, regional champions every single year, it's not a very big operation. It's a very small, intimate setting. Besides traditional sports info responsibilities that I think most people watching Through My Lens understand go into it, take me inside the dirty work and the day-to-day. What do you do at a small school that's maybe beyond the scope of traditional sports information work?
Well, when I first started, we were doing any and everything from setting the gym up before the game started. And I mean, pulling tables out, setting up the benches, setting up the bleachers, putting the side goals up for like a basketball game and things like that. Netting up for volleyball. We were essentially your events management staff, facilities, everything when I first started, as a part-time assistant. So we would be there probably 4 hours before a game started, getting everything set up and ready to go outside of your traditional sports info side of things. And then obviously doing the in-game side of things where you're statting. Back then, social media wasn't as big as it is now, obviously. But the in-game things, the things with the media post-game that we had to do. And then we had to break down everything as well after the games. So a lot has changed since then. Our staff has grown, even though, we're not at the staff size of your traditional Division I school, obviously, but it has grown to the point where we're not doing all of those things anymore. We can focus more on the things that we do as communications directors for the most part. And even that has grown since then with technology changing, social media coming into play, live streaming, and the way it's grown. So while we left some things in the past, we have picked up a lot of additional jobs that we have to take care of on a day-to-day basis now.
So how have you changed? Because traditional sports information director role was take care of schedules, rosters, game notes, stats, right? And then the social media wave comes, and you've been at Queens to see, so what, 2007 you graduated. That's kind of like the start of social media era, and then it took off,
Right.
from 2012 to 2015, somewhere in there, and it's even further today. So how have you changed your daily responsibilities, I guess more your game day responsibilities to fit that? You probably have to staff a person to run Twitter during a game, which you didn't have to do in 2007.
Right. There are positions during the game that we definitely have to make sure are staffed or make sure are covered. And a lot of that has to do with social media, graphics, things like that that we didn't have to worry about back then. But you have to adapt and change as the industry changes, and that's what we did. It basically just changed the way that we told our story. People consume information a lot differently than they did when I first started. And so we had to change the way we put that information out there so that we were serving basically our customer the way they wanted to be served the information. And a lot of people now, they want a quick video, they want to consume information on social media. So you have to change the way you do your job to cater to that in a sense. Back then it was a lot of story writing. People really couldn't watch the game. There was no Twitter to follow along with the game. We had live stats. It wasn't as in depth as it is right now with the way the websites have changed, the way people can view live stats and things like that. And so now you've got to be more creative in putting that information out there for people to keep them wanting to come back. They want quick information. You got to give it to them quick.
As the head of the athletic communications department, again, a very successful school. First, let me ask you this. How have you balanced dealing with Queens people? Many people may not know, as Queens has kind of really come onto the scene here in the last few years and been very successful across the board. More than 700, almost 800 student athletes at a very small school that's about 16 to 1,800 undergraduate, depending upon the year. So almost 50% student athletes, 32 sports. How do you balance life? You got a newborn child who's 9 months old. You have another young daughter. How do you balance life, Fee?
I think a huge part of that is having the right people on staff around me who can help me balance my work-life balance and help me with that. But yeah, it's not easy. I won't say that it's easy. Right now with the pandemic, I'm working from home because my son is not in daycare right now. And so a lot of that is my husband's help. A lot of that is my staff's help and having to rely on them to cover things on campus that need to be covered if I can't get up there during the day. But I'm still there on game days. I'm still there for the game for the most part. I have to be. That's not something you can really do from home. So yeah, my staff helps me a lot though. Having a good staff around you is very key to being able to do to balance your life. And we all work together because we all have families. We have significant others, and so we have to work together and kind of balance out who's working this game, who's doing this game, so that everybody kind of gets a day off here and there. Right now it's a little bit harder to find those days with us having all of our sports in season, but we still try to make it a priority because it's important to be able to spend time with your family and to be able to just have a day off and check out for your mental health. I feel like is very important as well.
When I worked for you, Fee, I used to always say for a small school that many people outside of the area may not know about or just learning about nationally, that what is done in athletic communications, what's done in your department that you lead, is as vital as any toward recruiting those 800 or so student athletes. What's the one thing you feel that is done athletic communication wise at Queens that has made Queens Athcom, but Queens athletics as a whole stand out? What's the one thing for you?
For me, I think it's being able to adapt and change to what's going on around us. Um, for example, the live stream picked up pretty quickly, and it became very important pretty quickly as a recruiting tool. I feel like for a lot of our student athletes who come from far away, we have a lot of international student athletes here, and we even have students from across the U.S. So that became very important. So being able to adapt to that change and make it something that we could make us stand out with. So we put a lot into the live stream. You know, we ended up hiring you because we knew how important that was going to be at that time and where that growth was going. And so things like that, especially even things like social media, social media was really big. It's very big with the current group that's coming through and being recruited. So you have to be visible there. If you're not visible there, it's kind of like if a lot of kids, if they can't find you on social media, they're kind of like, it's legit, unfortunately. And so you have to be there and you have to do a good job at being there. And so we put a lot of energy into making sure that, our people were trained on social media platforms and strategies and how to utilize those the best way. And so, so I feel like those things were done well. And then the things behind the scenes, you have to do those well. Details are always important. People pay attention to that stuff. So you never want to slack on the details of anything that you're doing, in my opinion.
It's amazing to me, Fee, though, as you speak about it, and looking back on my time with you, it's amazing how much is balanced by so few people in small college athletics in Division II. For example, there was no TV. The live stream, before I got there, you were setting up and running the whole thing.
Yeah.
Even at times you still have to do that. There's no TV network in the picture. It's just amazing to me how much you balance and how much every single person in your department is forced to balance every single day. And it only gets harder when you have 14 teams in the NCAA tournament every year playing longer seasons that overlap with each other.
Right. Well, I mean, it all goes back to why I started doing this job and why I got into it. A huge part of it was wanting to give the student athletes at Queens something that I felt like I didn't have while I was there as a student athlete. I think we had a sports information director just 1 year that I was there, and that was my senior year when I was interning. And I don't think we had a full-time sports information director on campus the whole time I was there until then. And so being able to enhance that student athlete experience at Queens was something that when I went into the job, that was one of my main goals. I spent summers digging through archives with my boss at the time, trying to set up just record books because we didn't have record books at that time.
Who kept stats without a sports info director? Nobody?
Students.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you had work study students doing it and different people on staff and things like that. So, but I think at the time, a coach was doing it as part-time. So when I say we didn't have one, we had one, but it wasn't your true sports information director. It was a coach doing it part-time and doing the best that they could at the time with what they were given and what they knew how to do. So, but yeah, it goes back to that. That's what I have to go back to on those hard days when I'm working from 9 a.m. to like midnight, putting out that last story. You just always have to go back to the why. And it's always about the student athletes, in my opinion.
Yeah. The other thing that I know about you specifically and about sports information directors as a whole, especially at small college levels, when the workday ends, the work goes home with you. A lot of other positions, even in college athletics, I think the workday ends and it doesn't necessarily go home. The work goes home with you. So like basketball is the big sport at Queens, right? After a basketball game, you still have to, sit down and write the story. You have to worry about social media. You have to worry about stats and highlights and all these other things. So how long might you be sitting down in the office before you leave after a game, or at home after you get home right after the game and still sitting there, contacting the media, et cetera?
Well, for me, I'm fortunate enough to spread that stuff out with my staff. So for me, it's a lot of times it would be the story post game, and then my director of broadcasting handles the highlights and things like that. And posting stats would be who's ever in charge of that team and things like that. So for the most part, we've been able to spread that work out, so it's not such a long, busy day for one person. But there are certainly offices out there who don't have that privilege. And so there's that one person sitting there for a few hours post game, doing your highlights, posting your story, talking to the media, doing interviews and things like that. So, I mean, it honestly just depends on the office and who's on staff, how that works in a post game situation.
When you first started after your time as a student athlete and you became an employee in 2007, do you ever think that 14 years later, it'd still be at Queens?
The way I worked my way up, probably originally no. But, as I stayed on and kind of started falling more in love with college athletics and it being my career, I would say, yeah, there's a few people on our staff I feel like are Queens lifers, and people keep asking me if I'm that person. Am I a Queens lifer? I guess at this point I am. But, as the opportunities kept opening up while, I went from part-time assistant, and then I went to a full-time assistant, and then my boss at the time left, and I was in a position to apply because of everything she had taught me. And I was in a position to apply for that position. I ended up getting it, and then just kept getting promoted over the years. And a lot of my hard work, I feel like, paid off in the long run, due to a lot of the hard work I put in the beginning and throughout. And so while I never thought I would still be in this position, I'm definitely happy that I am.
How'd you even find out about Queens? Because I've worked with you, and I know we get a lot of emails in my time there that were intended for Queens in New York. And a lot of people, again, are just finding out over the last few years about Queens and Charlotte because of dominant success athletically. So how did you, back in 2003, find out about Queens?
Well, see, that's another interesting story, because I already knew about Queens from the early 90s, because my sister, who's 10 years older than me, played basketball at Queens as well. And so funny thing is, my sister was the former AD's first recruit. Okay. And I ended up being her last recruit. So when I came in, it was Jeannie King's last year as a head coach, and she just went on to just be the AD after I got there. But so I always knew about Queens. I had been on campus through the 90s. I had actually spent the night in one of the dorm rooms with my sister when I was younger. I knew Charlotte. I knew Queens. I loved Queens. I had been to games in the oven. So it wasn't a new school to me when I decided to start looking for a school to attend.
And you grew up in Greensboro, say 90 minutes away, not too far.
Right. Page High School.
Nice.
Have to plug that.
Last question for you, Faye. Something that you and I don't think we've ever discussed before, and maybe it's a good thing that we have progressed as people past that point. But this Through My Lens series and why we're even having this discussion is in part because of your successes as a Black woman to be in an administrative position at a prominent collegiate athletic department. Do you ever think about that and put it in perspective? And what does it mean to you that you've been able to accomplish so much, maybe given some of the other obstacles that have been in your way and those before you?
I think when I first started, I didn't really think too much about it. Honestly, didn't think too much about it till probably about halfway through my career. And I started looking around and noticing that there weren't a lot of people that looked like me in the room. a lot of times, depending on where I was or what I was doing. But I also felt like that wasn't something I was necessarily new to. Even growing up, there, in the classes I took and the things that I did, a lot of times there weren't a lot of people that looked like me in the room, so I was kind of used to it. Not saying that it's okay that it was like that, but it was something that wasn't not normal for me. But I did start looking at it and wanting to figure out how to get more people that did look like me in the room. And so a lot of times when I, for example, am looking for GAs and things like that, even with my staff, I try to be as intentional as I possibly can about having a diverse staff in our communications office, whether that's my assistants, my full-time assistants, or GAs or interns or student workers. I try to make it a diverse group. I think it benefits Queens. I think it benefits our student athletes to have a diverse group looking at how they're telling their stories and things like that. I think there's no way to lose when you have a diverse group telling the story of the student athletes. We have diverse student athletes, so there should be a diverse group of people telling their stories, in my opinion.
Fee, this has been a pleasure. Thank you for doing this for a few minutes. And it was always a joy working with you, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Phil.